A few years ago we had a big wave of survival games, and after the success of Metal Gear Solid 5 in 2015 and some disagreements with its creative head Kojima, Konami decided to jump on the bandwagon and release Metal Gear Survive. It combines gameplay from Metal Gear Solid 5 with typical survival elements. So we gather resources, we build things out of it, we get hungry and thirsty, and we kill zombies. If that sounds generic AF to you, you are absolutely correct, and people wondered already at release what the point is with this game. But not just that. Additional to the skepticism of the players, the game made a lot of noise at release, with being always online and having very weird mobile-esque monetization in it. Like that you need to pay money for additional character slots, or that you can buy resource loot boxes. So I like survival games, and this game was on my mind for a while now. I wanted to finally play it and answer the question, is it still bad? Let's take a look at it.
Good work. We are victorious.
As always, let's start with the story. The game begins with the end. We died as a normal soldier in the middle of the attack on the mother base while we are helping Snake and his friends to get away. But then something weird happens. The sky opens up and a wormhole starts to suck in vast parts of the burning mother base, and we are in the middle of it, trying to stay where we are. Sadly, we didn't thought much about physical consequences of dropping a few dozen meters above the ground into water, metal and rubble, and yeah, we die. But we are not dead for long, because a man named Good Luck takes our corpse to his working place to revive us later and throw us onto the world from the other side of the wormhole. He gives us the order to find the vanished special group that was sent there before us, to gather needed information about this world, and of course we also want to return to our world too. After we make our first steps, we find out very quickly that we are not the only person that somehow got there, and that this world is swarmed by zombie-like creatures with glowing crystals as heads that really don't like intruders. Additionally to that, most parts of the surface are covered in thick clouds of dust, where we have to wear gas masks in order to survive. But that's also where most resources and plans for new items are, besides the notices and the research bases of the people that were stuck here prior to us, and that might have found a solution to our problem with getting back into our world again. And that basically kicks off a story where we find other people that are stranded there, find ways to survive in this wasteland, and most importantly, find a way to get out of there again. A good chunk of the story is told in voiced chats between our group members and an AI that has a split personality, which is by far the most interesting character we are going to meet in this game. At the beginning I thought that it's going to be the usual Japano alternate universe bullshit, but to my surprise, it gets pretty interesting in the second half of the game's story and comes up with some interesting twists and reveals. So the story was solid. Nothing special, but absolutely fine as a reason to play the game, and I, in summary, had a good time going through it. What isn't fine, on the other hand, is the graphic of the game. Not just that it looks really outdated, what was already the case at release, and that it didn't age that well either. Overall, the game seems to be barely optimized for PC, and that not only in terms of graphic or performance optimization. Even with a decent system and an install on an SSD, I got loading lag from time to time, and even when a lot of things are happening at the same time, the game felt unsmooth to me. At least in terms of sound and music, they are absolutely fine and satisfying. Especially cracking these red crystals on the heads of the zombies has a really nice hit feedback, and the soundtrack does a good job to create a fitting vibe in story situations. But besides those story missions, we have no music, unless we place a building that we only get in the later half of the game. So there is barely music for us at the beginning overall. Design-wise, the game is pretty similar to Metal Gear Solid 5. The menus are minimalistic and sometimes pretty... It, well, really feels like bad menu design from the late 2000s. That a lot of Japanese companies seem to be not willing to modernize and streamline, at least a little bit. I think most people know what I mean. And then there is the weird satire-ish touch that got adopted from Metal Gear Solid 5 and that is especially present in the possible looks of your clothing. We all remember Quiet, right? The girl that has a fungus parasite in her, so she has to wear almost nothing to breathe, right? So in the first hours of the game I got many clothes, but barely any of them did really fit together that well. And after I got a baklava, that was by far the best gear for my head slot that I had at this time, I just said to me, yeah, you know, fuck it, let's go full BDSM style. And that's how I played a good third of the game, until I noticed that there was a cosmetic slot for headgear. Well, I ignored it and ended the game with a cowboy hat. Felt good, but I think I don't have to mention that this made any serious scene in the game look completely stupid. But hey, the game doesn't take itself too serious in general, so that was fine for me, but may put other players off. What the developers took serious though is the character editor that honestly surprised me. You can change your character's face and detail, and you have a lot of solid presets if you don't have a lot of fun moving sliders around for hours. I really like that, except the very limited options for hairstyles and colors, what was a little bummer here. Another bummer is again the optimization. Survive being a shooter, I usually prefer to use mouse and keyboard for that, but that game's mouse and keyboard support is on the level of a Dark Souls 1, unacceptable. The menu controls via the arrow keys alone are just ridiculous, but the controls in general feel very rough, so if you want to play the game at all, absolutely use a gamepad. And yeah, then you're starting into the game with a spear in your hand and it feels really, really bad. In general, the melee combat isn't great in this game. Actions cannot be cancelled. If an enemy is already attacking, they won't get staggered from your attacks. The range and hitbox of their grabs is absurd for the long range of our weapons, and there's basically no advantage over the bows we can find relatively early on that made melee weapons a serious option for me, except maybe that I don't need arrows. But even besides that, the combat in general is very dull, unless you kill zombies as stealthy as possible. It always comes down to set up a fence and kill these zombies powered by artificial stupidity through them. If they get too many, you throw a Molotov and keep doing this over and over again. Only relatively late in the game we encounter enemies that are actually dangerous on their own without them having to overwhelm us by sheer mass. And that takes us to another meh part of the game, the XP gathering. Because most of the time we don't get XP by just killing enemies, but we have to extract the currency called Kudan from every single enemy. And this is the most annoying part of the game, because there is no way around it. If you want to get this currency, and that is by the way also used for everything else and not just leveling, you have to go from one corpse to another and play this animation over and over and over again. And that's not just annoying because it's, well, boring AF, but it's also annoying because we are usually under a time pressure. See, the core gameplay consists, besides a little crafting and base building, mainly of go into the dust and search for items, resources, and now and then to do story objectives. That mostly happens by following the lights of bases and chests because you can't see far in the dust, but also by just randomly wandering around or following streets until you get somewhere. Now, the air filter of our gas mask has a time limitation and can only be filled up again by spending some Kudan. So every time we explore the dust, our time is valuable. It keeps the core gameplay interesting, but you don't want to spend half of the time crouching above dead enemies to get their cooldown, or to get your arrows back, or to gather some random resources. So the beginning intensity of the time limitation gets more and more annoying over time. And yes, as in every other survivor game, there are resources, and not just a handful of them, but many. What usually resulted in me looting everything I came across because I rarely knew what I really needed, and after getting back to the base the resources would be automatically transferred into the base storage anyway, so there was no reason for me to not do that. And it was fine at the beginning, but by exploring the dust we also find bases with teleporters in them, and those bases are usually filled with all what we need. So what happens more and more often towards the end is that you just port to all bases once and loot everything you can find, and then, well, play a while until the things respawn again to just do that again. And despite that, I rarely had issues with too few resources. That wasn't fun, obviously. It was just another chore in this game. What now brings us to the map and why that system doesn't really work either. So first of all, we don't have a minimap. What led to me open the map menu every few minutes or even seconds, because I want to know where I roughly am. Why that is important, you may ask? Well, the whole map is invisible until we move over one of the tiles and get back to base. After that, the tile gets revealed and we can see the player marker on it. The only reference of position that we have without having the specific map tile unlocked are streets. So that's what you're often looking at on the map to guess where you are after you explore the dust for a while. And that gets annoying AF. That is probably also one of the reasons why one of the most downloaded mods for the game simply cleans off the dust and gives you a minimap. And then there are also the useless markers for the map, where you can mark spots for yourself because the game doesn't do that for you. But for all the mentioned reasons, it's completely useless. And then also we have to keep us fed and moist all the time. That's nothing new for this genre, but the amount of food and water we need is ridiculous. That isn't a problem later on, but at the beginning something like clean water is so rare that this alone creates some form of time pressure where you have to push the story forward until you get access to the tools to craft clean water. Or you end up with just dirty water that, on the other hand, has negative effects on your character. Overall, the whole survival stuff it's not a hard system at all, but the frequency is just, again, annoying. So why did I still keep playing the game? Besides me wanting to continue the story, obviously, there are the item boxes in the dust that contain new blueprints and new gear. It's a pretty cheap carrot, but one that works for me almost every time. I just like to progress my character and get new cosmetics. Well, that last one was more a hope to find something that doesn't look completely stupid, what didn't happen, as I said before. Also, the process of uncovering the map was interesting and we got regularly the task to defend points, may it be to progress in the story or to unlock a teleport point. It usually ended with a massive slaughterfest and got pretty fun the more traps and tools we got over the span of the game. And the best thing about it, you got the cooldown for killed zombies automatically, without having to loot them by the dozens. Big win here. Also, fire is fun and overpowered as heck. In the end, despite having a lot of annoyance, I got a good time playing the game while listening to some podcasts. But I have no idea if I had finished the game, if I had played it on stream, because the core gameplay loop is mostly the same, and at some point it gets frustrating trying to find an upgrade for a weapon in a place you have to rely on the possibility to see a blue light in the distance or randomly stumbling over it. I almost skipped the first upgrade for my bow because of this, until I just googled the location of its chest. But as long as you feel that you unlock cool new things, the game kept me interested, and I think it's still worth to mention that fact. after I criticized so much of it. Another pro for me is that the game is in the third-person perspective. Most survival games these days are in the first person, and visual progress is therefore barely existent. What is a shame for the type of player I am, and therefore the game is in a niche where there isn't that much competition. Before we get to the conclusion, let's go over some more things I need to criticize. Yes. First, the game is still always on and has completely unorganic online features stuffed into it. For example, you get daily login rewards. Don't ask me why, but those rewards can completely break the game. If you get a really good trap that you might not be able to craft yet yourself, that can make hard part of the story so much easier. Same was the case for the beginning and my water problem. Log in, plop, 5 new bottles of clean water. Or, for example, the daily and weekly tasks. Kill 5 zombies and you get X amount of loot boxes. Or those weird mobile-like system where you send a few people out to a mission and have to wait for several real-life hours until they get back with resources to you. It's just so unfitting to the game. Besides the completely optional co-op mode, there is no need for always on. Also because that prevents you from playing at all when they have their weekly server maintenance or any server issues. And monetization. Remember what I said at the beginning of this video? That kind of monetization still exists. Pay money to get more character slots. Pay money to get loot boxes with resources in it. Pay money to get cosmetics or pay money for more mobile waiting mission slots. You can indeed ignore all of them, except the login bonuses, but it looks so bad for this game. And it's not like there's any development of it anymore that would justify any of this. And for that alone, I wouldn't pay a single cent more than I have to for this game. But there is something else I wanted to mention, and that is a lot of the game's systems start when it has already ended. The literal endgame consists of content and systems that were straight up cut from the core of the game to throw it at the end of it for any stupid games as a service reasons. The most annoying thing here are the skill trees. We get 4 new skill trees in the endgame, with several super useful skills that would have enhanced different ways to play the game. Before that, we only have 1 tree with basic stuff like more health, more endurance, 1 more attack and a combo, and things like that. And it really pissed me off, because why would I continue to play the game after I finished the story? There is nothing here that I could be interested in to do, and it's so stupid to cut something like all those skills from the main part of the game. The endgame only consists of the most boring parts of the core gameplay loop and defense missions. That all don't matter because there's nothing that gets pushed forward by doing it. It's a single-player survival game where someone slapped some games as a service on top of it and made it worse this way. I really don't get their decision-making here, but I may have got a grasp now why Kojima might got pissed at Konami over time. As a conclusion, I have to say that the game could have been better with some more streamlining and better thought-out systems, and much more optimization. But Konami decided to make it worse in favor of some unnecessary online features and stupid monetization. But on the other hand, the game is not unplayable and has some moderately fun hours in petto, if you can deal with the many annoyances or just download some mods for it. Also, it's not expensive anymore, you can get it for under $10 as a key or on sale. And therefore I can still give it a 2 out of 5. Because is Metal Gear Survive still bad in 2023? Objectively, yes. But is it worth a look if you're a fan of the survival genre and not easily driven away by Japanese designs? Then yeah, sure. The problem really is not that it does a lot of things super bad in a way that it's game breaking or can't be ignored, but it simply doesn't do a lot of things really good and is often just annoying. For big magazines, it's the kind of game that would get a 50 to 60 rating. It's mediocre, and I think that little word summarizes the game very well. Mediocre. And I think I will leave it at that. Just to say, this was my review of Metal Gear Survive in 2023. My name is TechDrag, but just call me Techie. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, don't forget to hit the like, subscribe, and maybe pay me a visit over at my streaming channel, Techie's Tavern. See ya.